Yeah, I don't think, Les. You're live now.
Right, there we go. Yes, we are live. Another week of truth proof, Paul. Really hot week this week. Really hot evening as well. So, what have you been up to?
It's been busy, 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 but nothing UFO related, if I'm being truthful. Well, apart from did a short on cliff tops earlier in the week, but just a few family things that have to be resolved, but all good, no complaints, and same as everybody else. I think we're just coping with this hot weather, aren't we?
Yeah,
And
that's it.
cracking
So,
guest to talk to tonight, Les, and really looking forward to getting to grips with what this
yeah,
guy's got to tell us.
and I'll just mention that we did notice this when we go through the stats of the Truth Proof channel that half the viewers are not subscribed to this channel. So, if you could please, it will help us greatly if you could subscribe, click everything you can find, but most importantly, we found if you give the stream a like, that really helps us push it further. So we've got in the chat
One
tonight, Paul.
second, Les, I've got a bit of sound coming through. Oh, good. Yeah.
So who's on the chat tonight, Paul? Who's in the chat box tonight?
A few people. We've got the sober Carper, Lee Roscoe, great supporter of Truth Proof, Kim King. We've got Sky doing the moderating, and Alison, so appreciative of that. The disabled Welshman, Diane Farrell, MK5446, Ralph Winter, Minnie Moose. Had an incredible account from that lady, to be honest with you. Once again, somebody who's been instrumental in Wolflands, The Revenant, and I'm sure that Linny will be in at some point. Ian Linford, Janice Parry, Lisa Odd, Fat Bobby, sounds like my little dog. And they sound like a bingo caller here, guys, don't I? But yeah, all good. Ralph Winter, Jessica Pym, my daughter, Pat Adams Wright, all good. Thank you very much for the support, Stargazer Eternal. And I think we could go on and on and on with this.
Yeah,
we missed you. We do
So
apologise.
at this point, then, Paul, I'll let you introduce the guest and we'll bring him on screen.
Yeah, well, are you going to bring him along now, or am I going to just talk about the guy? Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thrilled to be talking to Dan Harary. And yeah, what a life. What a kind of, it's got to be said. And before we actually get to Dan's experiences and Dan's views on the subject of UFOs and the paranormal, we ought to be saying that he's also spent 40 years in the entertainment industry as a publicist. In that time, I don't think I'm going to be wrong in that you could probably not drop a few names, Dan, because you've rubbed shoulders with some highly influential people, as well as writing 3 books and a 4th book on the way, I believe. Am I right, Dan?
Yes, that's correct. Hi, Paul. Nice to be here, man.
Welcome to Truth Proof, Dan. And before we get to anything paranormal and be as detailed as you like, just tell us a little bit. Let's hear the background of Dan Harary.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for having me on. So I grew up in Asbury Park, New Jersey, which, if anyone is a fan out there of Bruce Springsteen, you probably know that his very first album, I was telling Paul earlier, Bruce's very first album came out in 1973. It was called Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. Bruce and I, as well as Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito, we're all from the same place. And so I grew up on the Jersey Shore. And when I was in high school, you can see my drum set behind me, my electronic drums. But when I was in high school in the 70s, I had very long hair. I was a drummer. And I also worked stage crew for a concert hall in Asbury Park, right on the ocean, called the Sunshine Inn. And believe it or not, Bruce Springsteen used to play there in the early 70s. So I knew Bruce Springsteen in 1973. When the week his very first album came out, I worked with him on lighting and stage crew for his show there. And this is even before the E Street Band existed. It was called the Bruce Springsteen Band. Anyway, so probably the highlight of my childhood was working at this rock concert hall. I worked there for 3 years after school. I worked with Humble Pie, Jay Giles, Deep Purple, Kiss, Fleetwood Mac, Focus, a lot of big British bands. But I worked with Bruce when I was a kid. I went to Boston University for college to study communications. When I was there, shock jock Howard Stern who was I don't know if he's famous in the UK, but Howard Stern's very famous in America. He was in college when I was there. He was 2 years ahead of me. So I used to see him in the hall because he's so tall. He stood out a mile. I met him 20 years later, but I didn't know him when I was in college. After college, I worked briefly in Manhattan at Columbia Pictures movie studio. A friend of mine from college got me a job, and it was an interesting job. I worked with Brooke Shields when she had a movie called The Blue Lagoon. Brooke was only 15 at the time, and it was a big hit movie. So I knew Brooke and her mom. I was friends with them for a while. But I was commuting from New Jersey into Manhattan. And anyone out there who's ever commuted into Manhattan, it's unpleasant. I was on a bus, Paul. I was on a bus 4 hours a day, 20 hours a week, coming and going from Manhattan. I couldn't do it. So I left there after about 6 months. I moved to Los Angeles in 1980 in the fall. I had friends on Venice Beach who were from New York who were very kind to put me up. I slept on their couch for 1 year. I had no job, no car, no money, no connections. I had $6. I had nothing. Slowly but surely, I knew I'd get into the entertainment business. I knew it was going to happen at some point. I got a job at the American Film Institute. Then I got a job at the Playboy Channel. Then I got a job at Columbia Pictures again. Then I worked for two very, very famous PR agencies in Hollywood. And I represented Jay Leno for a while. When he first got The Tonight Show, I was his publicist for years. And then when I turned 40, Paul, in 1996, I had an epiphany to start my own company. I just turned 67 the other day. So I've had my own business. It's the Asbury PR Agency, Beverly Hills. I've had it for 27 years. I've represented hundreds and hundreds of people, companies, restaurants, authors, TV shows, independent films. It's been a good life. I have to say, I've been very fortunate.
So Dan, before we get to what drives you as regards the unexplained, what do the people within Hollywood, within this industry that you're immersed in, think to your fascination with unexplained phenomena, or do you keep it separate?
It's such a great question. I have kept it apples and oranges entirely, completely separate. Having said that, I represent Musso and Frank. It's the most famous restaurant in Hollywood. It's 100 years old. It's a very, very famous Hollywood restaurant. Charlie Chaplin made it famous in the 20s. About 2 weeks ago, I had dinner with the owner and his wife. And they said, Dan, what's new? Well, I mentioned my book and UFOs, Paul, just to make conversation. And they said, you're into UFOs? How come you never told us? They go, we love UFOs. My client's wife said she saw a major sighting in 1996 in Colorado. And so we were talking, and she goes, keep us posted on you. So I said, look, I kept it separate. It's a personal interest versus me being a professional publicist. But that's the only time it crossed over, and it went pretty well. But I like to keep my business and my books, I like to keep them apples and oranges, to be honest.
Yeah, because obviously we'll get to after they came. We're going to get to your sighting first, but even that's fiction, isn't it?
My book is science fiction, but I always say it was inspired by my dad, my father. I mean, you want to go into that?
Well, no, I do, without a doubt, because I know it's played such an influential role in your life and your thoughts on what you saw. So right. I suppose we can jump straight in and go to 1970 and be as detailed as you like. Don't worry if it takes longer than you think. Let's go for it.
Go for it. Okay. So I told you about my, the entertainment side of my life, separate and apart, entirely separate and apart. 1970, March 1970, my father picked me up from school and drove me home in New Jersey, suburban New Jersey. And as he was driving me home, now I'm 14 years old at this time. And as we're driving home past my neighbors' houses, Paul, I looked through the windshield of my dad's car, and there was an enormous silver V, like letter V, like Victor, huge, hovering in the sky, maybe 200, 300 feet above my father's car. And it was just hovering, shiny silver V. And I said, Dad, look up in the sky, look up in the sky. There's a UFO. Stop the car. There's a UFO. So my dad stopped the car. We got out. We stood in front of the car. We looked, and Paul, I'm jumping up and down going, Dad, look, isn't this cool? We're seeing a UFO. Isn't this great? And Paul, my dad looked at it, no expression whatsoever. No interest, no fear, no curiosity, no joy, just no expression whatsoever. Then, the killer part of this story, my father leaned down, winked at me, and said, come on, kid, let's go home. Now, I forgot about that story, Paul, for 47 years. I completely and utterly forgot that had ever happened for 47 years. What happens in 2017? My father passed away. Dad passed away. I went to a deli in West LA to get a pastrami sandwich. And as I'm waiting for my sandwich, and this is a true story, I'm sitting there minding my own business, mourning for my father, who had just died, and something from heaven, and I almost call it a beam of creativity. It was almost like a light beam from heaven, beamed into my brain. And Paul, I saw in my brain the home movie of the 1970 sighting. I watched it, like I'm looking at you right now. And I'm like, wow, because I'd completely forgotten about that. And I saw it, and I saw my dad's reaction and how he winked at me and all that. So why is this interesting? My father was an electronics engineer for the Army, for the U.S. Army for 45 years. He worked at a top secret Army base. And my dad invented and designed missiles, radar systems, and drones. He once told me he was in the earliest days of military drones. That's one of the few things he ever told me. So I called my mother, who's still alive, and I said, Mom, did Dad ever talk about UFOs in his work, 45 years for the Army? She said, not really, but in the early 50s, they took my dad into the vaults at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, where he worked. She said deep into the vault. That's my favorite part of the story. Deep into the vault. And they showed my dad something top secret. And he came home and he was pale and nervous and shaky. And my mother said, honey, what's wrong? And my father said to my mother, I saw something today, top secret. They showed me in the vault. I can never tell you or anyone about it as long as I live. And Paul, he never did. My father never broke that protocol.
So obviously we'll jump back to your father in a while, but the V-shaped UFO and his reaction, do you think he'd seen something like this before then?
Well, my gut feeling, truly, and this is going to sound maybe far-fetched to some people, but when I reviewed my father, right, and this is after he died. My dad never talked about his work. When I said in high school, Dad, what do you do for a living? He said, I helped America win the Cold War. That's the only thing he ever said really about his job. So let's review. My dad was an electronics engineer who built drones. I know that for sure. He worked at a top secret Army base for 45 years, starting in 1951. Okay? That's only 4 years after Roswell, Paul, right? So think about the time on the calendar. Number 3, my mother told me he saw something top secret that scared him to death. Number 4, my father and I had a major UFO sighting together, and he had no expression on his face. And number 5, my mother recently told me that my dad used to go to White Sands missile testing grounds. She said he went there all the time to watch his drones and his missiles be tested. So I believe, here's what I believe, truly, that my dad not only knew what the flying V was, I know he winked at me. Okay, I know he knew what it was. I believe it came from Fort Monmouth, which was an Army base very nearby my house where I live. And I think because he was in that cluster of brilliant scientists. I think he may have either had a hand in its creation or its design or its functioning. And here's the crazy part, and I swear I believe this is true. I think my dad knew about recovered alien technology. He worked at a top secret army base. And this thing, Paul, this was not normal. What I saw in 1970, there were no propellers, no exhaust, no wings, no sound. Just imagine just a giant thing floating in the sky, barely even moving.
So can we take from that then, Dan, that you think this thing's potentially man-made?
Correct. I've given this a lot of thought. I truly believe that sighting, and I've had two other things that I've seen later on, but I believe in retrospect, based on my father's reaction, that what we saw, my dad knew what it was. It was a military man-made drone. I'm quite sure it was a drone. And, I think our government and our military created, this is one of the theories about some of the UFOs over the last 70 years. Some of them are extraterrestrial for sure. I absolutely for sure. Some of them are misidentified phenomenon. And I believe that maybe a third, Paul, are man-made craft that were designed to trick the public into thinking they were extraterrestrial. But the thing that I saw with my dad, I'm convinced that was military man-made.
Well, nobody could have had a finger on pulse closer than you and your dad. So I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Why have we never seen that technology, Dan? 1970, we were 53 years on. Just your views, and I'm not asking you for a definitive answer.
Well, I've been asked, how did our government and our military keep this a secret for so long, right? I've been asked that by people all over the world. And my only answer, Paul, truly is one word: pension. Pension. My dad was sworn to secrecy, and there was no way he was going to jeopardize his pension. My dad talked about retiring when he was in his 40s. When I retire, I'll do this. When I retire. My dad works his ass off. He had a very hard job, and he always said, when I get his eyes would light up, in 22 more years, I can get my pension. There was no way that my dad was even going to tell my mother, right? He never told my mother what he did for a living. So, military, right? Civilians who worked for the military, probably contractors, people who were sworn to secrecy from the 40s even till now. And look, Dave Grush just came out 2 weeks ago. He had top secret clearance. He was a whistleblower. They're just starting to come. What's his name? The famous one, the famous whistleblower. I forget his name now. You know who I mean? I
don't know the name.
From Area 51, the famous.
Oh, Bob Lazar.
Right, Bob Lazar. So think about, Roswell was 47. Okay, we know that our military and our government has known for sure, even earlier than 47, but certainly since 47. How few whistleblowers have there been? Mm-hmm. There's Bob Lazar. There's Dave Grush, who came out 2 weeks ago. I can't think of even another person, really, So that's how tight top secret, and this lid is on, really screwed in, man. And
can I just push you a little bit more on your sighting, because it's an incredible sighting. 14-year-old seeing that,
right.
And obviously you firmly believe that this is man-made technology. So how have we just got some real tragic time in your life, and obviously you've lost your dad, and a few days later you get this download, something you'd forgotten about for best part of over 50 years, and how do you account for that? Because it seems to me pre-planned, and I don't mean it contrived. I just mean there's something else at work. That's what I'm thinking. That's how it comes over to me.
The week my dad died, And the week or two after he died, April 2017, Paul, he came to me in dreams at least 5 or 6 times. Came to me in dreams as a young man, young, healthy man. He died a very bad death of cancer at 87. It was not pleasant, his death. He came to me in dreams, and I'd say, Dad, you look great. How are you? And he goes, well, I'm dead, but I really wish I wasn't. My father told me that in dreams. To answer your question, and honest to God, I believe that my dad from heaven, it's crazy, but my dad, how else would that have happened? My dad from heaven sent me that download at the daily restaurant where I used to have sandwiches with him. You know what I mean? We used to eat pastrami there. And he gave me, and Paul, I think it was a parting gift from my dad, as if to say, Danny, I never told you what I did for 50 years for work. I'm dead now. I guess my secret oath is no longer top secret. I'm going to send you a clue from heaven, and then you do with it as you will. And Paul, right after I had that download, that afternoon, I started writing my book after they came. It was a direct response from that download. I think it was a heavenly message from my late father, and I truly believe that.
Is it? I know you've told us it's a huge V-shaped metallic or shiny silver. What size we're looking at? Did it have any lights on it? I know it's a daylight sighting, but
it was a daylight sighting. I believe, if I remember correctly, there were little lights, one on each of the tips. And in my childhood memory, Paul, and this could be way off, but in my memory, there was a white light, a red light, and a blue light. Now think about that, right? Red, white, and blue. If that was the case, it could say, hey, you know, we're American made. Here's a little clue, red, white, and blue. And I know there were 3 lights on the tips in my childhood fantasy, and that could be way wrong, but I remembered it as red, white, and blue lights.
Fabulous, thank you. Before we move on, I'd just like to say to anybody in chat, you know the score. Questions in capital letters, please, for Dan. And yeah, let's have some, and then we can come to Les in next 10-15 minutes. Your dad had top secret clearance. I know I seem to be dwelling on your dad, but what was, you might not even know what the abbreviation for. What's GS13?
Okay, so my mother just told me this recently. Okay, right. And I don't know if that's still the case now. Okay, so my dad was a civilian. He was a physicist and a scientist, and he was brilliant. My father was brilliant. Side note, my father had an older brother named Frank Harary. If you Google Frank Harary, my uncle, he was a world famous mathematician. So this is my father and his brother. These guys were geniuses. I'm not a genius. I'm not even close. I'm retarded. You know, I'm not the brightest person but my dad and his brother, they were geniuses, like actual geniuses. So that's pretty cool if you think about that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so he started working for the government in 1951. In fact, my mother, he was dating my mother then. Oh no, they just gotten married. He just married my mother, and she was his secretary, I think, for a few months. And then she got pregnant with me and left. But I believe it's GS is government service. I believe is what those letters stand for. And when he started on day one, he was a GS5, which is fairly low on the scale. But he was there for 45 years. And when he left, Paul, he was a GS13. Now, I've told that to Richard Dolan and Nick Pope and Steve Bassett and George Norrie, and they've all said, wow. Because I think GS15 is the highest you can be.
Right.
My dad was a GS13, man. That's pretty high up on that scale. That's number one. Number two, my dad used to give talks at the Pentagon when I was a child. He'd say, you know, I'll be back tomorrow night. Where are you going, Dad? I have to go to the Pentagon. Oh, okay. You know, I'm going to go play baseball with my friends. My dad's going to the Pentagon, right? He spoke at the Pentagon. Once when I was little, I remember he told me he wrote a report, or he'd written reports that Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford had read some of his reports. I go, Dad, presidents have read some of, yeah. He goes, yeah, some of the presidents have read some of my reports. Okay, well, that's pretty high up the chain. So again, Paul, and I love my father very much. We were very close. But after he died, all these things came to me because my dad never talked about his work. He didn't share. He was a great dad. We did everything together. He never, ever took, you know what I mean? In all the years I knew my dad, 60 whatever years of my life, he never spoke about his work.
Are there questions, Dan, that you wish you would have asked now?
I asked my dad once when he retired down in Florida. I think I said, Dad, you know, have you ever seen a UFO? And he chuckled and he probably went like this, like, oh, please, you know, like, oh, please, like, tee hee hee, and turned and walked away. That was his big response. There was no way he was going to, not even telling me, his oldest son, he was not going to jeopardize that pension.
Yeah, I can't be in your shoes. It's a totally different life, but some of the things that I experienced, and there were one thing that I experienced with my mum and dad, and I don't really recall talking about it, you know, and it's a big regret. I wish I had have pushed him a little bit, and he didn't have anything like top secret clearance. You know, he were in RAF, he used to fly planes, but nothing like that. So
he may have seen Foo Fighters. You could have asked your dad if he saw Foo Fighters, right?
Well, yeah. Well, before we move on, have you any views on Foo Fighters? What are they, Dan, in your opinion?
Well, what's funny about Foo Fighters is that our American pilots thought they were German weapons, and Germans thought they were American weapons. To me, it was the extraterrestrials telling both sides of the war, hey, we're keeping an eye out, you know. They didn't interfere. As far as I know, they didn't interfere or shoot planes down, but they were zigging and zagging around the planes. I believe it was like, hello, we're here. We're keeping an eye on you guys. You know, you think you're so, you know, hot S word, but you know, we're here and we're more powerful than you guys. So, you know, just hello. I think it was like a little wave, you know, and that's before Roswell. World War II ended in 45. Roswell was 2 years later. So I think it was almost like the preface of a book. It was like the first page of a book, like, hello, you know what I mean?
Do you know where we are on East Yorkshire coast here in United Kingdom and in North Yorkshire? And I would have thought many parts of United Kingdom, and with your involvement in MUFON, you've probably heard this before, but we have lots of reports of orange and yellow spheres of light over the sea and in remote parts over land, kind of baseball-sized spheres of light that just appear, don't fly from anywhere, just literally punch into existence. And I've often thought that these sound remarkably similar to the Foo Fighters, you know?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, yeah, a lot of people see balls of light now. If it really is a ball of light, then it's not by deduction, it's not a craft. So it's not metallic craft like we all have seen. My opinion, if I had to guess, I would say that the balls of light are either drones or probes. You know, they're floating around, gauging maybe the temperature, the wind. Maybe they have cameras that they're sending, feeding back to motherships. They're sending video, you know, our take of video, our version of video. I think they're probes or drones. I don't believe that there's an entity inside. I don't believe it's a craft. No, I think that's how it's like you know, like some animals have feelers on the tip of their tentacles. I think they're just feelers.
Yeah, well, I think that's as valid as anybody could say, Daniel.
Right.
So we'll not go to questions just yet. We're 30 minutes in. Can we hear about your 1996, your second sighting then, please?
Sure. Okay. Now again, the 1970 with my dad, and I'm 14. Okay. And like I said, Paul, and this is true, I forgot about it. Why did I forget? In 1970, I was a drummer. I was in high school. I had very long hair. I had friends. I was in rock bands. I had light shows. I was working with Bruce Springsteen. Do you know what I mean? My mind wasn't, oh my God, I saw an amazing UFO. My mind was two things. When am I playing my next gig as a drummer in a rock and roll band? And when am I going to ask out that pretty girl, the cheerleader? When am I going to get the courage to ask her out for a date? So the UFO sighting in 1970, as incredible as it is now, as I realize, amazing.
It pales into insignificance, doesn't it, compared to what were happening in your life then?
Yeah. Paul, I when I got home from that sighting, I called the newspaper and I said, "Hi, my name is Danny. I'm 14. I just saw a UFO with my dad." And the lady said, and I remember it clearly, she goes, "Sonny, I can't talk to you right now. I'm getting hundreds of phone calls. I can't talk to you right now." She hung up. I looked at the newspaper, Paul, every day that week, and no story ran about the sighting. There was never, not that I ever saw, and I looked. Well, after a day, 2 days later, that was it, man. It wasn't part of my life. It played no role in my life. Do I wish I had to ask my dad verbally, "Dad, what the heck was that?" I never even did that. It's crazy. I never said, "Dad, what was it?" I would have loved to know his answer, right? I wish if I could go back to that moment, Paul, because I'm going, "Dad, UFO." If I had just said, "Dad, what do you think that is?" His answer would have, even if it was nonsense, it would have been an answer. You know?
Yeah. So obviously, all these years later now, have you been tempted to search any archives, or do you just not think that there's any? There's no paper trail there that you would find, and we're back at 1970 again, but it doesn't matter.
I believe in recent years I Googled and saw nothing. Now, this is very interesting, and we'll get back to 1996 very soon.
Yeah.
My book came out in March, and March, April, May, June, I've done a lot of press all over the world, including George Norrie. Along the way, I think about a month ago, Paul, I got an email. This is one of the greatest emails I ever got. And I got an email that says, "Hi," I didn't save it, but it was something like, "Hi, Dan, my name is Bill. I grew up 2 towns over from where you lived as a child." It's called Tinton Falls. I grew up a few towns away. He goes, "We heard you talk about your 1970 sighting with your father, the Silver V." He said in the email, "My 3 older siblings saw the same exact craft that you saw in March 1970. They saw a Silver V flying over our town, and their whole lives, they thought they were crazy." And the guy says, "Dan, thank you for verifying this sighting. I'll have to tell my siblings that what they saw was real." Well, that was valid. That was pretty cool, man. That someone else on the planet saw what I saw that long ago. Okay.
And it would be good, Dan. I mean, your time's invested in other things at the moment, but to actually put that out there more often, because I bet you weren't alone in seeing that daylight sighting, huge silver V-shaped object. There'll be more people out there. 1970 or not, there'll still be more people out there.
It's so funny. I mean, 1970, the Beatles, I remember the Beatles were breaking up. Okay, that's how long ago the Beatles had just broken up. That's how long ago the sighting was. And to get an email now, all these years later, it's just amazing, really. Okay, so that's that one. All right, so again, after that sighting, 2-3 days later, it was gone from my mind, just gone. Wasn't something to even think about. Now we jump way into the future. I had gotten married in the 80s. I was with my wife 11 years. We made 2 kids. I got divorced in 92. And my ex-wife and my kids moved out to Lancaster, California. I live in LA. They moved to Lancaster. Lancaster's about an hour and 45 minutes in the desert. So it's a pretty hefty drive east of Los Angeles, northeast. Now, my ex-wife was renting a house near Edwards Air Force Base. So let's keep that in mind. My son turned 8. When my son turned 8 in May 1996, I went up every weekend to be with my kids. I never missed a weekend. I have a son and a daughter. So when my son was 8, he wanted a telescope for his birthday. So I got him a telescope. I brought it up, gave it to him for his birthday. We went out in the backyard. He's a little kid. He's 8 years old. And we were looking through the telescope that night. Now in Lancaster, there's no smog. There are no city lights. You can see the sky, beautiful. It's dark black with the bright stars, not like LA. You can see the sky there. It's the high desert, it's called. So we're looking, we see the moon, we see Saturn, we saw, I think maybe Mars, whatever you see with a telescope. And we had a great time. And then it was my son's bedtime. I was going to bring him to bed. And right before I had to bring my son to bed, Paul, I looked up in the sky one last time with my naked eye, not the telescope. And I saw in the far right-hand corner of the sky, traveling very quickly, was a very bright egg-shaped thing, bright egg-shaped object that was sort of white-yellow in color. Okay, and it looked like an egg, so it was an oval. It was oval, and it was traveling from the right side of the sky very quickly. Do it with my hand here, across the sky in a straight line. And I said to my son, Jordan, look, it's a satellite. That's a satellite, right? What else could it be? All the way. Now, Paul, here's the great part. It gets to the left-hand corner of the sky. It stops in place. Stops. And I thought, wow, it must be having a mechanical problem. It's gonna plummet to Earth. I really thought this. If it stopped for 30 seconds, it's gonna plummet. Okay, Paul? It stopped at 30 seconds, and then it went all the way back where it came from, the same line. Yeah. And I said, Jordan, that's a UFO. It's not a satellite. It's not a comet. It's not a meteor. It's not an airplane. Nothing man-made. Nothing nature-made. Nothing could do that. Okay. Now, so I believed that was extraterrestrial. I told that story to Jimmy Church. Do you know Jimmy Church?
Yeah.
When I told Jimmy Church said, Dan, you were near Edwards Air Force Base. He goes, they test alien technology craft there all the time. And Jimmy said, that sounded like a test. And you know what, Paul, when he said that, I'm like, you're right.
Yeah.
Because of the stopping, it was almost like, okay, we just did that. That was pretty cool. That went well. Let's see if we can do.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that was a test. Whether that was an ET or man-made or hybrid, I couldn't tell you. But if you put that together, that had to be from Edwards Air Force Base.
Yeah, I would think you're right there, Dan. And it can't have been up in the heavens for you to have a discernible shape. When we look at a star or a satellite, they look circular, don't they? But you're talking about an oval shape. So do you think it were way up in heavens for you to be able to?
It was high. It was high up, but it was so bright, Paul, that I could clearly see the shape of it and the color.
Yeah.
And it was pretty high up. And honest to God, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, clearly this is a satellite. Because, you couldn't see that it was metallic, but it looked like a man-made object.
Right, okay.
I didn't see silver. I didn't see a craft. It wasn't like the Silver V at all. No relation to that. It wasn't like an orb. It wasn't an orb because it was so brilliant. My feeling, again, if I had to guess, I'd say military made using some ET technology, hybrid. Was it a craft? Was it a drone? I have no idea. But whatever I saw, that's hard to explain how it stopped and then reverse course. That's hard to explain.
So father and son, you and your father. What about your son and you after seeing that? Does he pass comment or now, all these years later?
Unfortunately, we don't. We had a falling out, and it's a painful subject. We don't speak. We haven't spoken in 5 years. But
right.
I've asked him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, Dad, that was cool." You know what I mean? He was 8.
Yeah, it's strange how these things dissipate, though, Dan. In people's minds.
But what is cool, and I don't remember if this was you or someone, but this is cool. I saw a UFO with my father in 1970, And then in 1996, I saw another UFO with my son.
Yeah, that's
Right?
that's
The fa-
yeah, that's the
the
thinking.
father,
Yeah.
someone pointed that out to me. I'm like, father, son, father, son. I'm like, wow, I hadn't thought of that. So that was it was kind of like the tradition in my house.
The first thing that I saw, and I didn't know I'd seen a UFO, Dan. And obviously, I'm a little boy, don't keep a diary. I think I was about 4 years old. And when my dad put me to bed, I went to bed. He was pretty an hard man to deal with, if I'm being truthful. And
Yeah.
I've no fear in saying it. As in fear, I'm no shame in saying it. He didn't mind using his hands. So I knew better than to get up. And apart from using bathroom. And he woke me up. He came to wake me up when I was about 4 years old to watch. There's a power station to right-hand side of when we looked over these fields and the town, and there's a big sphere of light, 200-foot cooling towers, and it looked to be just above the rooftops of the houses. And he woke me up, and we watched this sphere of light just slowly travel along the rooftops, but it was really big. And then he left me. I never get my head around why he left me and didn't say get back in bed or go to bed. I assume he went downstairs to watch it from Bottom Garden. But yeah, that were a kind of father and son sighting. And one at rare at times that I don't know, I've got some kind of memory with my dad because I never asked him about it. We didn't really discuss it much. It's strange. But there you go. It's just another one. I mean, I suppose there's lots and lots of family sightings, should we say, and I don't know. I wonder if we see things different. I wonder if he saw something slightly different to me, just because of my young eyes looking at it. I don't know. I'll never know now, will I? But
well, I mean, that's a wonderful story. It's comparable to my 70 sighting, but Paul, you were 4, man. When you're 4, I mean, when I was 4, my parents were gods. They were gods on Mount Olympus. They told me to eat or go to the bathroom or brush my teeth. Yes, mommy. No, yes, dad. They were gods on earth. If I was 4, I would never have questioned my parents about anything ever. Like they tell me what to do, that's it, and I'm gonna do it. Had you been a little older, but again, I was 14, and I didn't say, Dad, what the hell is that thing? God, how I wish I had said that.
Yeah, well,
it.
It's difficult, isn't it? There's so many questions that if only we'd have asked these questions, because as you mature and become an adult, I could have asked these questions, but it was culture that I'd grown up in, and perhaps yourself as well, that if you weren't asking them, it just weren't done. And I don't know, big regrets, but obviously we can't turn clock back. And there's a few things that happened, but that sighting in particular, and I think that was the catalyst what I wrote about in Truth Proof 1, that book there, and I call it the Intermind Connection, because I'd noted, I mean, you will have interviewed lots of people where you're working with MUFON, but I've noted that some people, when they're having a sighting or they're immersed in a sighting, suddenly it becomes aware of you. The phenomena becomes aware of you. And in some of these cliff top sightings, because we're very close to coast here, I'm 500 meters away from North Sea where I'm sat now. But we've got all these cliffs, and you get anglers that go up there and they'll fish in remote cliff tops. And there's a few of them said that they've seen these strange lights out at sea, and then suddenly the lights above them. And it's almost, I call it the Intermind Connection. And I know we've got another sighting, and you might not have finished with 1996, so I'm breaking into your report here. But we can do the other one if you want in it shortly. But we can cover some MUFON cases if you want to, some notable ones that have interested you over the years.
Well, yeah. So let's get to my 08 sighting, because you just mentioned the mind, body, spiritual
Intermind connection.
Right. Okay. That's exactly what happened at my 08 sighting. Exactly. But before I get to that, I'm just going to keep recapping. 1970 sighting with my dad, completely forgot about it. 1996 sighting with my son, very cool. Never thought about it. Really, never thought about it. Maybe told a few friends, and that was it. Okay. Now we come to the year 2007. And this was a turning point for me. 2007, I went to a bookstore. There was a bookstore next to a movie theater. And I was waiting for a friend to go see a movie. So I was killing a few minutes in the bookstore. And I noticed, Paul, a paranormal books aisle. And however old I was in 2007, I forget. But in my life, I'd never even heard about paranormal books. You know what I mean? I read biographies of every famous Hollywood person you could think of. And another thing for me is the JFK assassination. I've read probably 200 books, but I never, ever in my life knew that they were paranormal books. I didn't know that that was such a thing. So I bought books about UFOs and crop circles and reincarnation and Bigfoot and ancient Egypt, because I didn't know any of this stuff existed. It was just not taught to me by my parents or my teachers. I'm Jewish, so my rabbi never brought it up. This is information I never had. I think I was 51. I think it was my age. So I brought like a dozen books, like my arms filled with books. I brought them home. I read all of them. And during those books, I heard about MUFON. One of the books was Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. Well, that was like, hello, that was like, really? Oh my God, that explains so many things, especially in the Bible. That explains miracles in the Bible. Okay, so 07, I bought these books, heard about MUFON in the books, joined MUFON from the books. Now, my very first MUFON LA meeting was in 07, and I lucked out, man. Giorgio Tsoukalos, who's the star of Ancient Aliens, and he's Eric von Daniken's protege, as you know. He was the guest speaker. Now, Paul, I'd never heard of him in my life. And this is 2 years before Ancient Aliens went on the air, okay?
Was all hair stuck up?
Yeah, even then it did, yeah. He's been very consistent with his hair. So he's like, hi, I'm Giorgio Tsoukalos. I'd never heard of him. No idea who he was. And for 90 minutes, Paul, he did biblical references to craft, cave drawings, petroglyph carvings in the Indian Southwest, the pyramids in Egypt, the pyramids in Mexico and in Central South America, Stonehenge, Easter Island, Roswell, UFOs and Renaissance art. It was, in the 90 minutes, it was the greatest hits, literally, of ancient alien theory in 90 minutes. But Paul, I'm like this. I'm like, where has this knowledge been? I'm a 51-year-old man at this. I'm like, oh my God, this is the greatest information. I go, this explains so many things. God, aliens, angels, so many stories in the Bible. Moses parting the Red Sea. There's some, Moses and the burning bush. Well, in ancient alien theory, the burning bush was a UFO. That makes a lot of sense. If they gave Moses the 10 Commandments, it wasn't a bush. It was probably a UFO, and he thought it was a bush because he didn't know what a UFO was.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously these people weren't illiterate, but their interpretation would have been totally different, and they've only got what they can relate to.
Right, exactly. There was no metal. I don't know if there was metal then, but there were no airplanes, no spacecraft, and you see these cave drawings. In Egyptian hieroglyphs, there are quite a few that look like helicopters, even.
Yes, I've seen them.
That. So, okay, so at the end of the 90 minutes, I went up to Giorgio, and I think I hugged him, but I shook his hand. I don't remember if I said, Giorgio, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. I go, you have opened my eyes to a whole new world. Right just now, you've opened my eyes. And he goes, cool, thanks, man. Okay, that was 07. So from there, that's when I went I didn't go to every meeting, but I went quite often to the MUFON meetings in LA. Now, MUFON has chapters in every state, pretty much. Okay. 1 year later is 2008. The guest speaker at that MUFON LA meeting, Paul, I don't know if you know him, James Gilliland.
Well, I don't know him, but I know exactly the ranch.
Right. Okay, so in 2008, the guest speaker at MUFON LA was, the one that I went to was James Gilliland. Now, James is like a cleric. He's like a wise man. He's like a spiritual, religious kind of cult figure. You know, he wore long robes when he was speaking. He seemed like almost Jesus Christ like in his manner. He's very calm, you know, angelic look on his face. Cool guy, real cool guy. I went to that meeting with a girl I was dating at that time. Her name was Barbara. So Barbara and I were in the audience for James Gilliland, and my name is James. I own a ranch in Washington State. It's at the base of Mount Adams, which is a famous mountain up there. And he said it's been a UFO hotspot for hundreds of years, going back to when the Indians owned the land. They used to call Mount Adams, the Indians called Mount Adams the Mountain of Shining Light.
Right.
Well, that's pretty cool.
The clues are there, aren't they? The clues are there.
That's pretty cool. That goes back 100, 200 years. And then, Paul, he showed the videos and films and slides of UFOs captured in the sky above his ranch. It's a world famous UFO hotspot. Today it's called the ECETI Ranch, ECETI. When I was there, so my Barbara and I went in 2008 to the ranch. I think it was just called James Gilliland's Ranch. But now today, if you want to go, and I recommend it highly, it's called ECETI Ranch. James still owns it. So he showed remarkable evidence of sightings. Well, I tell Barbara, I go, I want to see UFOs. I want to go see. So I talked her into going. So we spent a 3-day weekend at the ranch, along with maybe 250 other people. It was 4th of July weekend, 2008. I remember because it was 4th of July weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I believe it was. And Paul, during the days, there was a tent on the property. There was a tent to cover from the sun. So during the days, I think Nick Pope spoke. I know William Henry spoke. They had a film about orbs. They had talks about ancient Egyptian pyramids. It was, very ancient aliens-esque during the days. Seminars, lectures, films, lunch, fascinating stuff. So I ate it up. And then each night, Friday night, Saturday night, so each night of the 3 nights, they made a bonfire out on the field. And this is many dozens of acres. It's just wide open space. There's nothing there except Mount Adams is in the distance. It's just a field. And then they made a bonfire, and then at night, so people would play guitars and tambourines and dance around the fire and sing and dance. Some people got high, smoked pot, taking pictures. It was very communal, very fun, very nice. So the Friday night, Barbara and I looking up in the sky, hours and hours, we're like, come on, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Nothing, absolutely, not even a satellite, right? Nothing. Okay. The next day, lectures, seminars, films during the day. Night, bonfire, guitars, looking up, Saturday night. Come on, it's Saturday night, come on, you got to do it. Come on, please. I'm like, please, come on. Nothing, Paul, nothing, hours. Now, your neck starts to hurt when you're looking up in the sky. Oh, yeah. After a while, your neck starts to hurt. Okay. Third day, the last day, seminars, lectures, panel, bonfire at night. Same thing, looking up for maybe 2 hours, nothing. I go, Barbara, and now this is the funny part of this. I took out my car keys. I go, Barbara, if we leave right now, we can beat the traffic. We'll beat the traffic because there's probably 200-300 people here. Paul, no sooner did I say that, out of nowhere, a craft appeared directly above us, 200-300 people, maybe 300 feet in the air, maybe lower. It was fairly low. In my mind's eye, I would say it was black teardrop shape, but underneath it, let's see about this, there was a dome. On the underneath of the craft was a dome, and that dome lit up very bright dark emerald green light, like from the Wizard of Oz, emerald green, gorgeous color, gorgeous. And Paul, and then here's what happened. So we're looking up, we're like, holy S, look what that is, right? And it went like this, the light directly above us. It was flashing on and off. To me, personally, it was saying, hello, we're here. We're sorry it took us a few days to get here. We know you've been waiting for us. We're in the neighborhood. We thought we'd say hello. Everything's cool. We love you. We think you're great. Don't be afraid of us. Everything's cool. Everything's fine. We just wanted to say hello. We'll talk to you later, right? Maybe 12 times. It was like it was definitely communicating for sure. I know it was. And then took off, vanished with 2 seconds. Now, Paul, I cried. Other people there were crying, laughing, kissing, hugging, dancing. And I remember, and now that was 2008. And to this day, right here in my heart, right here, I can still feel that interconnection of whatever that was communicating to us. It was spiritual and loving and wonderful. And honest to God, I can still kind of feel right here that it was a pleasant thing. These were not aliens that were going to eat us or kill us. These were aliens that were in the neighborhood, thought they'd say hello. They knew we had been waiting for 3 days. And it was a connection for sure. Absolutely.
Well, we've just talked about the intermind connection. It's almost like it did happen for you, didn't it? You know, you were making some kind of conscious decision that you were going to go, and suddenly this thing appeared. And it's fabulous. So the reaction of everybody else, do you think, were very similar? Elation.
Elation. That's exactly the right word. I think my girlfriend cried too. I mean, I was actually crying tears of joy. It was like, wow, not just we had a sighting, because I had two other sightings when I was younger, and they were cool, but it didn't affect me, right? It was cool, okay, and then I'm gonna go home and eat spaghetti. This one was like a sighting that communicated with us. It was it was interactive, and man, that was not a China spy balloon. That was not a Chinese spy balloon. And I don't think that was a drone that my father built. I think whoever was in that craft were extraterrestrial beings who had an affinity for mankind, because when they left, people were crying and laughing and cheering. So it was a wonderful moment in my life. It really was.
Would you like to go back?
I would. Yeah, I would like to go back there.
Yeah, we have a lady who comes with us onto Cliff Tops, Amanda, and she's spoken about her experiences, and she went to the Iseti ranch and she saw lights. 100% that they were blue lights that Amanda saw. I mean, but she might correct us. She might even be in chat. But yeah, she'll vouch for the sort of strangeness of that location. I'm going to pull Les in a moment, if he's still around, and see if we've got any questions. Les?
Yes, great show so far, guys. Absolutely fascinating accounts there, Dan. Yeah, we've had some good reaction in the chat tonight. I've got to thank everybody for coming onto the stream, obviously, and thanks for supporting us. Great support from you guys on a red hot summer's night here in the UK. And as the Alison and I think Sky suggested, please press that like button, because that's what's going to get us running through the algorithms, and more people will see this stream after it's finished. On that, and we'll move to a question, and I'll put the question on the screen for you guys. So the question is from Annie K, and I think Annie's from Australia. Oh, yeah, so she might have missed a little bit there. I don't know if you want to fill her in on a little bit, or do you want us to move on? It's up to you.
No, that's fine. What has Dan written? Okay, so hi, Annie K. I'm a Hollywood publicist. I was telling Paul, I've worked in Hollywood for well over 40 years as a publicist. So I've worked with a lot of very famous celebrities along the way. My first book came out last year, and my first book, it's on Amazon. It's called Flirting with Fame. Flirting with Fame. A Hollywood publicist recalls 50 years of celebrity close encounters. See, I got my UFO tip of the hat in there with the subtitle. A Hollywood publicist recalls 50 years of celebrity close encounters. I mean, I worked with Bruce Springsteen, Annie, when I was 15 years old. So that kind of stuff up till now. So that was my first book. My book that came out March 1st this year is this one, After They Came. It's a science fiction novel that was inspired by my dad's passing, and my dad worked for the Army. I was telling Paul, my dad had top secret clearance, and I believe he invented drones that used alien technology. I'm quite sure that he did. And after he died, I put two and two together and wrote a book as a tribute to my late father. I have another book coming out next March. Paul and I haven't discussed it yet, but that'll be on Amazon as well. That's called My Paranormal Life. And that'll be ghosts, poltergeists, angelic spirits, situations and events I've manifested, I've thought of in my head, and then they came true. Dreams, an experience I had when I was 5 years old. I believe I died, and a spirit, a creature brought me back to life. It's very wacky. My mother thinks I'm batshit, I'm batshit crazy. My mother thinks I'm insane. She goes, these are just dreams. And I go, Mom, no, these things really happen. No, they're just dreams. So that's my next book next spring, called My Paranormal Life.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. I've got a question here from Patricia Adams-Wright. Dan, how difficult was it to swap from publicity to writing UFO books?
Apples and oranges, Patricia. I'm still a publicist. I've been a publicist for 40 years, every single day for 40 years, and almost exactly 40 years. So I still work. That's how I make a living, is show business publicist. My UFO book completely came to me, as I told Paul, and it's a true story. Right after my father passed, I was at a restaurant and I had a vision of a 1970 UFO sighting that I saw with my father that I'd forgotten about. And after my father died, I had that vision, and I took notes with a pen at the restaurant. I came home and I wrote After They Came. So they're concurrent. They're apples and oranges. They're not so much related. Writing books is a personal passion for me. Entertainment publicity is my income, and I help support my mother. So it's apples and oranges.
Okay, I've got another question, I think. Lee Roscoe, question: do you think the US view the paranormal differently than the UK?
Wow, well, that's a great question for Nick Pope, right, Paul?
Yeah.
That's a Nick Pope question.
Okay.
What I've seen since 2017, the New York Times front page, the 3 UAPs that the Navy released, and my friends, my relatives, people that I know, it's more, I'm not sure about the UK. I've never even been to the UK, but in the US, this topic is becoming less comedic, less sarcastic, less, oh, the little green men are coming, Dan, ha, 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 or, Dan, you're so obsessed with aliens, there's no aliens. Well, the New York Times front page in 2017, U.S. government studying UAPs. Okay, New York Times. Okay, this is real. This phenomenon is real. It's been real. I can't compare it to the UK. Paul and Les would know. But in the US, my experience, it's more out in the open. It's less of a topic of derision, I think is the word. People are making fun of this topic less. I'm working with Steve Bassett. We haven't gotten to that, Paul, yet, but Steve Bassett is one of the top champions for disclosure in the United States. He and I have partnered up to help the disclosure movement gain momentum. So I'm all in. I know this is real. I'm all in on disclosure. I can't wait till disclosure happens. I tell my daughter, who's 33, I hope disclosure happens in your lifetime. And she says, Dad, I hope it happens in your lifetime. so that's my answer.
How can we? I'm with you on what you're talking about there, and agreeing with you. But how can we believe anything that the governments of the world are telling us when we've gone through like you said, that all of this ridicule, decade after decade of ridicule, freedom of information requests that have constantly denied the existence of these craft, this phenomena, then to find out that they've had top secret programs looking into it. So how can we believe anything that the governments of the world are telling us?
Well, that's where people like Dave Grush come in handy. He was a whistleblower. I think he worked for the Air Force or the Army or the Air Force. I forget. He came forward.
The Air Force, wasn't it? Yep.
Air Force. 3 weeks ago, he came forward at great personal risk. He said he was interviewed all over. He said, my life has been threatened. He said the U.S. military has recovered craft and recovered alien bodies. We've had them since the 40s. This is a real guy. This guy's been vetted by the media. This is not a flaky wacko guy with a tinfoil hat. This is a real guy.
And he were in an elevated position, and given access to look at these things as well, and look into this subject as well. And some of the sort of high-ranking military personnel have come out and said this guy's absolutely credible, which speaks volumes, really, for the people that are trying to discredit him.
Arrow has been having meetings with Congress. There's a congressman from Tennessee, I don't remember his name, starts with a B, who Steve Bassett is friends with. I had lunch with Steve Bassett for 4 hours yesterday. This congressman from Tennessee, he's all in. He knows this is real. He's working to get the information revealed. Here's the problem, Paul and guests and viewers. In 1947, a craft crashed at Roswell. They announced it. The publicist, the PR guy, and I feel sorry for this guy, Walter Haut, in 1947, he put out a press release. We've recovered a flying disc. Well, I wish I was the publicist for that story. Talk about a press release. That's the most historic press release probably ever. Next to Man Walks on Moon. It was incredible. That ran all over the world. The next day, Truman and his people called, or even that same day, they called Roswell and said, what the heck did you do? How dare you announce to the world that aliens are real? We didn't give you permission to do that. You have to rescind that press release, which ran all over the world. The next day, poor Jesse Marcel had to do a fake press conference with aluminum foil and sticks and twigs and say, oh man, we really messed up. We're so sorry. It wasn't a flying disc. It was a weather balloon. Here's the Reynolds wrap, aluminum foil. Here's what we got. Sorry, really sorry. We messed up. And all the press in the world, because this is 1947, and we believed our government and the military and the media. We believed them. Anything they told us, we would, Americans, mankind would believe. So the media said, oh, okay, so all right, cool. We're glad you admitted your mistake. It wasn't a mistake at all. Truman created the Majestic 12 group to study the phenomenon. The top 6 scientists and military leaders in America, 1947, September, Truman created Majestic 12. I believe that to be true. Richard Dolan believes that to be true. These guys came up with protocols for, if we get a craft, where does it go? What do we do with it? If we get alien bodies, dead or alive, where do they go? What do we do with it? If people see UFOs, how do we discredit them? When media report UFOs, how do we discredit the media reports? So, according to theory and legend, these guys were the guys that gave birth to the Men in Black. Majestic 12 group. And Men in Black would go to people's homes and ring their bells and say, you didn't see a UFO, you saw a weather balloon. If you tell anybody, we're going to kill you. Relatives of the Roswell people, relatives of the Roswell witnesses said they got visits from men who said, if you tell anyone, we will take you out to the desert, kill your whole family and bury you. You'll never be found.
Sorry, no, go on.
So all of that leads to why we've not been told. Now, Clinton, Steve Bassett's my new friend, and Steve knows a lot of stuff. Steve said President Clinton tried really, really hard to get the UFO files open. Clinton was president for 8 years. He couldn't do it. Obama tried really hard with, what's his name, his chief of staff, Podesta, for 8 years. Obama couldn't do it. So whoever has the grip on the craft, on the alien bodies, on the truth, on these secrets, whoever runs Area 51. Here's a good story, Paul. Did you ever hear this? President Eisenhower wanted to go to Area 51 to end it, to shut it down, and they wouldn't let him enter. I heard that somewhere. Right. President Eisenhower couldn't get into Area 51. Okay, that alone. The man won World War II. 5-star general president couldn't get into Area 51. That's why it's been a secret for such a long time. Once disclosure comes, the government is going to be beyond embarrassed. There's going to be all kinds of lawsuits about why did you keep this from the American people? That's a whole can of worms. But even, yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's where I was going when I was thinking about what you've just been telling us. And do you think that the lie, the lie that was created, we'll say after 1947 then, although it probably conceived before that, for the potential of anything like this happening, do you think that lie was just so big, so massive, that this is the reason that they're struggling now to actually give us anything? Because we've got the pilots coming forward, we've got the whistleblowers coming forward, but they're not, the actual people in power aren't actually opening their mouths and saying, yes, we got it wrong. The press release from Roswell, it was true. What do you think would happen if that revelation came out?
You mean if the revelation happened
I think we all know we're being lied to a degree on many things, not just the UFO phenomena. So, but what do you think what would the general populace, the opinion be?
Well, that's the big question. That's really the big question. Let's take a step back for a minute. There's a rumor that Adolf Hitler got a crashed UFO in the Black Forest in 1938. Why is that interesting? Well, the Nazis were way ahead of anyone else on the planet Earth with rockets and missiles during World War II. They were years and years ahead of anyone else. So there's rumors that Adolf Hitler had help from extraterrestrials. Okay, we'll never know if that's true, but that's a pretty cool rumor. That's number one. Number two, in 1942, January or February, there was called the Great Los Angeles Air Raid event. Do you know about this, Paul?
I do, yeah. The photograph.
Photograph, right? Which is probably the coolest photograph ever. Okay, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in December 41. 2 months later, I think it was Feb 42, over Los Angeles, there was a major UFO sighting, and the military had huge spotlights because America feared an attack by Japan, a land attack by Japan. So there were huge spotlights and cannons all along. I live in Los Angeles, so Santa Monica, Redondo Beach, I think Malibu, Ventura, all along the LA shoreline, there were these huge spotlights and cannons, military guns to protect the Pacific Ocean. In 42, something showed up, and it was lit up by maybe a dozen of these lights. It was the front page of the LA Times the next day, the front page. And an air raid happened in Los Angeles. People all across LA were told, turn off your lights and hide in your basement. Okay. And then I think they fired like 5,000 rounds of bullets or something, whatever it was. And then the thing vanished. Then we come to World War II, later years, the Foo Fighters, as we were talking about earlier, the balls of light, the Foo Fighters, I think were 43, 44, 45. All of those things, Paul, precede Roswell by years. The LA raid was 42. Roswell was 47. our government had to know something was peculiar.
Yeah.
Something was peculiar for 5 years, at least 5 years, if not longer. Okay, so our government, I believe that Majestic 12 and Truman set up protocols that exist to this day. Because here's another interesting tidbit, as you know. In 1938, Orson Welles did a War of the Worlds radio broadcast in America. Live from New York, coast to coast. It was the story of Martians coming to New Jersey to kill mankind. Well, a lot of people missed the beginning of that broadcast and thought it was really happening. And apparently thousands of people across the entire United States were panicking, going to their sheriffs, calling their utility people to turn off our lights. They went to churches to pray. A couple people had heart attacks. That was 38. That's a statement of fact. That happened. So 38, and now 47 is Roswell. That's only 9 years difference.
And 42 was the Los Angeles one, was it?
Right.
They called it the Battle of Los Angeles, didn't they?
That's right. Battle of Los Angeles. That's right. So if you're President Truman and Roswell happens in 47, you look back 9 years earlier, not that long, Orson Welles panic in the street when Americans thought the aliens were here landing. So Truman must have thought, well, I'm not going to panic the American people. We can't tell them the aliens are here. We know they're here, but we can't tell them. That's when the protocols began. What do I think about disclosure if it happened tomorrow? I think we're long past due. People that I've told who don't believe in any of this have all said, you know what? If they told us that was real, I think that'd be terrific. I think that'd be very cool. Now, a lot of very religious people, I think, deeply religious people, I think will be affected. Why? What if the aliens come and say, we're here, we've been here for 400,000 years, we helped to craft mankind with our DNA. Jesus Christ was, was a hybrid. Jesus was a hybrid, alien, human hybrid. He was special to us. He wasn't God. A lot of your ancestors, mankind, a lot of your ancestors thought we were gods. We're not really gods. We are extraterrestrial scientists and visitors. We're not really gods. So a lot of religions are going to be turned upside down. There are a lot of ramifications to disclosure.
It will shatter a lot of people's worldview of what they think actually is real. And obviously we don't really touch on religion truth proof because I know it offends some people, but it's belief. And when you've had these experiences, what you're dealing with, Dan, in my opinion, unless you're, and please don't take this wrong way, unless you're lying and unless I'm lying with what I've seen, you don't need belief because you've seen it with your own eyes. I think that's the difference. There's a lot of people, I think everybody, at some point in their lives is touched by the phenomena in some way or another. And a lot of people, I mean, you summed it up earlier, you forgot about it for the best part of 50 years. Right. And I just wonder how many other people out there, these things have slipped past them. It's there. I only think by talking and doing these podcasts, not just ours, just a full spectrum of podcasts about the unexplained, it's a snowball and it's gathering and more people are coming forward. But as regards the religions of the world and people who invested their lives in the religion, and no disrespect to those people, but if it comes to fruition, what we're talking about now, it's going to be a bit of a shock.
Absolutely. Actually, Paul, a couple things. I have a new client named Ella Lebain. I met her at UFO convention in San Francisco. She is an author of 6 books. They're called Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo. She is a biblical scholar. She's had numerous ET encounters, and she is studying, Paul, the relationship, and it's fascinating. I'm reading one of her books now. The relationship between God and angels in heaven with UFOs, extraterrestrials, and interdimensional beings. and she's making a study of it. And perhaps in the future you might want to have her on to explore
yeah,
that.
please put her in touch. Yeah, that would be brilliant.
I think she'd love talking to you. She's very brilliant, and she's been studying the Bible for 40 years. Biblical scholar. She studied in Israel, so she's a very interesting person. Anyway,
I mean, obviously, you might not have gone into any great depth with it, or you may have done. But what's her views on the relationship between the alien hypothesis and the religious viewpoint that we believe in God and I don't need proof because I believe?
I'm not a scholar in this area, but years ago I took Kabbalah. I took some Kabbalah 101 classes. For those of you who don't know, Kabbalah is, I'm Jewish. It's based in the Hebrew religion. It's based on ancient Hebrew texts that are not commonplace texts. It's the spiritual, mystical side of Judaism called Kabbalah. Madonna studied Kabbalah. She made it famous in the 80s. I remember that. When I studied Kabbalah, and I didn't study very long, but I remember, Paul, when I studied Kabbalah, there were stories and symbols in Hebrew of things like anti-gravity, disappearing and reappearing, flying around the earth. There were symbols and stories about things, and I saw this. I'm like, they're talking about ET technology from 5,600. The Hebrew Bible, I think, is 5,600 years old. These are 5,600-year-old stories. Anti-gravity? What was anti-gravity 5,600 years ago? What could flying? Humans flying. How could humans fly? People, Ella, not me, but my friend Ella, I'll hook you up. She knows the correlation between the history of extraterrestrial visits on Earth and how it correlates to the history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's really fascinating. She studied this phenomenon. I don't know much about it, but I truly believe, for example, in the Bible, Moses parts the Red Sea. I'll do this. Very first page of my book from the Bible. I took an excerpt from the Bible. This is in conjunction with Moses and the Israelites. They were in the desert for 40 years, right? This is in the old Jewish Bible. This is a quote from Exodus. The Lord went before the Israelites by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. Exodus 13:21. Well, a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire sounds a lot like a cigar-shaped UFO to me.
I'm thinking that when you were saying it, yeah.
The Israelites were led at night by a pillar of fire in the sky for 40 years. Well, what was that? I believe it was extraterrestrials who were helping the Israelites. I believe they helped Moses part the Red Sea. I believe they gave Moses the 10 Commandments. This is all part of Eric von Daniken's ancient alien theory. But it makes so much sense, Paul. It makes so much sense.
And I mean, obviously, we'll never know for sure going back in time, but I suppose things like that would have had to have been introduced very, very slowly, because you could not just arrive and, I don't know, thousands of years in advance with intellect and place that technology into the minds of people who, I don't know, it'd be like lifting a stone, wouldn't it? And insect looking up. So
Right.
Do you think then, I mean, you talked about disclosure, do you think that mankind is ready for it?
I think our government and our leaders are still very, very hesitant. They don't want to do it. But I believe, as does Steve Bassett and Stephen Greer, that their hands are going to be forced at some point. You know, they always say if a UFO landed at the White House lawn, that would be the day of disclosure. Okay, yeah, that would absolutely be true. You know, but let's talk about February this year. February this year, and this is very fascinating to me. February this year, there was a Chinese man-made China spy balloon that flew over the United States. It was man-made. It was from China. It was a spy balloon. We shot it down. We fished it out of the ocean. It was on TV. I saw it on CNN. They fished it out of the ocean. Okay, fine. The next week, 3 days in a row, America and Canada shot down 3 aircraft, 3 UAPs over North America. 3 days in a row, Alaska, Canada, Michigan, Lake Huron. Joe Biden went on TV after those 3 were shot down and said, well, you know, folks, we just shot down the China balloon, China balloon. And the other 3 things, you know, we're pretty sure they were balloons. But the China balloon. To this day, Paul, they've never explained what they were. They've never shown us the debris. Surely they got the debris. They never showed us the video from the pilots in the planes who shot these 3 items down. One was the size of a car, and one was a obelisk, I believe it was. Those were not man-made items. I thought Joe Biden was going to become the disclosure president. I saw him live TV. Well, you know, we just shot down 3 things, but you know, they were like this. It was like this. They were balloons. They were balloons. Now, maybe they didn't tell him. Maybe he thought they were balloons. I'm sure the military got these items. They got the China balloon out of the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean's pretty deep, as far as I'm aware. They fished it out of there. They couldn't get it from Alaska, Canada, and Lake Huron? Of course they did. Of course they did. Okay, so as of recently as February, we're still not being told. I think something's going to happen. It's going to force a president's hand, whether it's Biden or whoever the next president is. Steve Bassett is convinced within the next year or less, disclosure is going to happen. A lot of people are fighting for it internally in Congress, externally, and real life events are happening, and it's moving closer. It's going to. I hope my mother lives. She's 88. I hope she lives to see disclosure.
Well, yeah, exciting times, Dan. And just thinking about you talked about I think Les is here. We'll see if they've got any questions.
Yeah, I just thought I'd take this opportunity to come in with. I think I've got 3 questions here.
Yeah, that's good.
This one's from Annie K. And I think Annie's from Australia. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think she's saying UAP and consciousness. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, or conciseness. What are your thoughts?
Or conciseness. I don't know what she's.
I think she means consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Paul and I discussed that earlier, and I would say when I was at the Isetti Ranch in 2008, and I had my experience there with a UFO that was interacting with me and 250 other people. It went into my heart. The feeling of warmth and love was so powerful. I can still feel it from 2008. So UAPs and consciousness. Look, I've met a lot of people this year. I've met people who I belong to something called the LA UFO group. It's just friends and people who love UFOs as a hobby, and they meet once a month at a park in LA. They meet at a park, and the people there, many of them have told me they'll go outside, and they'll say, "Please show me. I love you. Please come. I love you. Let's have a relationship. Let's communicate." And I've met 3 or 4 people who said, and they showed me their videos, that these things, they'll come in their backyards. They'll develop, I believe, yes, absolutely there's a connection. I think only a few people on the planet Earth have a strong connection. I certainly don't. But I think that's part of the phenomenon.
Can I ask a question here from myself, Dan?
Sure.
When you was at the East City Ranch and you had the UFO sighting, and did you actually see it come out of Mount Adams itself, or did it just appear?
Okay. Okay, that's a great question. No, it didn't come out from that direction. That direction was north. It came from south, from behind some trees. It came from the ranch next door to us, behind some trees. So it came over our heads. We were looking north. It came from south to north over us. Okay. Having said that, this was pretty cool. And I'm not sure about this. Okay. That weekend, I had a new digital camera and I shot, I don't know, 100 pictures of Mount Adams, probably. And every picture had zero phenomenon, zero, right? I'm like, come on, I want to see something. As I'm clicking, a guy standing next to me with his camera, I swear to God, said, oh my God, look what I just got. The guy next to me. I looked at his viewfinder and I swear to you, that was Mount Adams and it was a classic silver flying saucer right in front of Mount Adams. He shot it maybe 5 seconds after my last click. And I look at it, I go, oh my God, this is incredible. How did you do that? It was fantastic. And I begged him, I said, please email that to me. Please. I think I gave him $20 even.
He never did.
And I said, please, I'm serious. Please, I'll do anything. I gave him my card. I gave him $20. He never sent me the picture. Now, let's be skeptical for a minute. He could have been a plant, okay, maybe, who had a Photoshop picture in his camera, and he was going around like to promote ECETI is an ET friendly place. So the more I thought about it, I'm like, why didn't he send me that picture? And I'm like, that might have been fake. So I don't. I'm 50-50. I don't know.
It's good though, Dan, that you broke it down and you're not just sold on the idea that it was the genuine. You know, it shows that you're not just away with fairies.
Paul, you know what, Paul? It was so perfect that when I saw it, I'm like, this is too good to be true. It's too perfect. And he clicked 5 seconds later. How did I miss it? You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, they're fast, and I missed it, but he got it. So 50-50. I don't know.
Okay. I'll just bring in another aspect of this as well, because we've talked about it a lot on Truth Proof, haven't we, Paul? We don't know whether we feel some of these craft UAPs or whatever description you want to give to them actually appear to certain people, or they appear to everybody. Because I think, Paul, you've had reports of where people have seen something, but somebody stood next to them has not.
Yeah, and multiple sightings where people actually see something slightly different. And I know it's all perception what we're looking at, and communication. Even we'll not go to the cryptids tonight, but even with the cryptid stories, 3 witnesses all perceiving something slightly different. But have you come across that in MUFON or any other area of research?
Well, again, this LA UFO connection group, it's on Meetup. It's on Meetup, and we meet once a month. There's a woman, the head woman who's in charge of this group. She said about 5 years ago, she saw something in her backyard, and she was so thrilled that she spoke to it. And now, and she showed me her videos. She said she can summon them. She can will them, not every day, but quite often they'll show up. So, Les, to answer you, I think there are many sensitive people on the planet, who have an affinity, who can. This is a lovely woman. They're so loving and warm-hearted that the ETs are like, yeah, that's a nice person. We should do a thing. Everyone today is on their phone. My daughter's 33. My daughter never looks in the sky. My daughter's on her phone. My daughter's friends they're looking down. I go, Anjali, look up in the sky once in a blue. Just look up just once in a while. No, Dad, I'm too busy. I'm Facebooking. So a lot of young people in this day and age, They're not
Okay.
looking up. Les, they're not looking up. They're looking down.
That's correct. I've got another question on the screen, Dan. Stargazer Eternal One. Apart from the UFO experiences, has Dan had any further paranormal experiences?
Yes, quite a few. As I told Paul, my next book in March next year, My Paranormal Life, it's 200 pages of paranormal things that have happened to me. After my father passed, he visited me in my bedroom 3 times as a spirit. Once, the first time he spoke to me, he woke me up and spoke to me. 3 days after he died, he spoke to me. I heard his voice. He told me his it's embarrassing. He told me his second wife changed his will. Well, it turns out I didn't know that until I hired a lawyer. It turns out my stepmother changed my father's will. My father told me that not in a dream, you guys. He told me that as a voice under my bed. My dad visited me a week later. He turned the lights on in my bedroom, turned my lights on and off. I knew it was him. A couple of days later, he started playing. If you see way in the back, I have a little drum set back there, a little blue drum set. My dad bought me my drums when I was 13 as a gift. It was a wonderful gift. So he bought me that drum set maybe 10 years ago. After he died, I woke up and the drum set was playing. It was playing. Okay, well, clearly that was my father's spirit. So all kinds of things with my father. My grandfather was a poltergeist in my house. I'll tell you that story. I've had light bulbs, literally light bulbs, go off over my head with great ideas that I then manifested and made them come true. One of them made me a millionaire. One of my light bulbs made me a millionaire. That's how that's how remarkable. A chandelier spoke to me at a meeting with my other boss. I was miserable. I'm at a meeting with my boss. I'm 40 years old. Chandelier spoke to me. In the meeting, it said, Dan, start your own business. I swear on my daughter's life, that's a true story. Dan, start your own business. I looked at the chandelier. I went, oh my God. Started a business, made millions of dollars from the chandelier. Okay, so have I had paranormal experience? Yes, I've had quite a few.
Let's just jump to that, the voice that you heard, and not the chandelier previously, your father. Was it what people would call mind speak, or was it audible? Did you hear it?
Not only did I hear it, Paul, so I was asleep. I was in Silicon Valley for a client meeting. I was at a hotel. I remember very clearly. He had died. That was a Friday. He had died that Monday, so it was 4 days later. I was asleep, probably 2 or 3 in the morning. I was asleep. I felt a rumble in the bed underneath the mattress. I felt like the mattress move a little bit. Honest to God, it moved a little bit. And then a booming voice, like deep, clear, loud bass, very bassy, came underneath the mattress. It came up from into my head. And when I heard it, I sat up in bed and it said, Danny, Jeannie changed my will. Now, Jeannie was my stepmother. Danny, Jeannie changed my will. Now, Paul, how would I have known that?
No,
My father was with that wife for 40 years. My brothers and I hired an attorney. He said, yep, your stepmother changed your father's will while he had Alzheimer's. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
That's a true story. So my dad absolutely reached out to me.
Yes. Dan, thank you for sharing personal things, deeply personal to you, really, there. Appreciate that. And to jump from that then, and I don't know whether you want to touch on it or if you've got any knowledge on it, but what about the darker side of UFOs, the darker side of alien intervention? What are your views on that?
Well, that's a good question. So in my book, after they came, I propose, again, this is after my father sent me the home movie download from 1970, let's call it. I wrote a book about benevolent aliens, man and woman, Nordics, tall white Nordics, long white hair, 7 feet tall, man and woman. They come to Earth 10 years from now to save the life of a man who is suicidal. On page 1 of my book, there's a man who hates his life in LA. He's suicidal. Life didn't work out for him. He's drowning himself in the Pacific Ocean. This is page 1 of my book. The lead character is drowning in the Pacific Ocean on his 70th birthday because he hates his life. These benevolent aliens come up from the ocean in a huge craft. They beam him up, bring him to Dodger Stadium, present him to the world as their ambassador, their liaison between them and mankind. That's my book. And people who buy my book and read it say, Dan, thank you for writing about benevolent aliens. My aliens, Paul, don't come to kill people or to eat people or to kill or ruin the earth. My people come to better mankind. So that's why my book's been successful, because people like it's about benevolent aliens. Now, I've heard stories and I've been to millions of seminars and things. There are many different, here's what I believe, there are many different races of extraterrestrials. Some are benevolent, some are neutral, some are evil. Well, if the evil ones are going to come kill us and eat us, it seems to me, A, they would have probably done it by now, or B, what chance would we have against them? You've heard stories how UFOs have shut down the atomic missile silos. You know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so to the audience, think about this. Our most powerful weapons are atomic weapons, humans. There are documented cases, Russia as well, Russia and the US, documented cases of UFOs hovering over missile bases, shutting down the atomic bombs, turning them off, as if to say, ha, 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 you think you can bomb us? I don't think so. So do I think there are evil ones? I'm sure there are. Are there evil humans? Yes. Hitler, Putin, there are evil humans. There are evil races. I'm really, truly hoping that the Pleiadians, the tall whites are called the Pleiadians. And I know someone, believe it or not, I know someone who knows them. He's in his 50s. He's been abducted since the age of 5. When I met him, I've told him about my book. He goes, Dan, your book sounds like my life story. He goes, I've been taken since I'm 5 by the Pleiadians. He goes, they're beautiful, stunning, beautiful people. They've taught me and my other abductees how to live in peace and harmony on the earth. And they take him up every few years, and he said they're teachers. So, Paul, to answer your question, I'm hoping that the Pleiadians are the nice ones who come, just like my book. And, think about that. If that really happened, my book would probably become a bestseller, because then people could say Dan Harary predicted that. Right?
So you wouldn't entertain, and I'm not sure I do, the thought that this planet could have been seeded like a crop, and now we're at critical mass, ready to be harvested.
That's absolutely possible. I know they seeded us. If you study Eric von Daniken's he called it ancient astronaut theory. Giorgio turned that into ancient alien theory for the TV show, but that's the same thing. I believe truly that they came 50,000 years ago, perhaps. They seeded their DNA to Cro-Magnon man or Neanderthal man, our primitive ancestors, for numerous reasons. You've heard of the missing link. People talk about what's the missing link between ape men and us. The missing link is when the aliens inserted the DNA into our chimpanzee ancestors. That's the missing link. Also, this is interesting. The University of Chicago did a study a few years ago called the Great Brain Event. And they theorized that 50,000 years ago, human beings' brains suddenly, very quickly in evolution, expanded dramatically in size and capacity, almost overnight, to have more knowledge and wisdom and all, and communication. Okay, so if those missing link, great brain theory, both 50,000 years ago exactly. Okay, they came, they put their DNA, they crafted us. Are we ready to be harvested? Probably.
Right. Well, Dan, we've got approximately 15 minutes left, and I'm happy if Les wants to break in with questions anytime. If not, I want to touch on some of the the experiences and stories that you've got from the forthcoming book. You touched on poltergeists, and if Les breaks in, let's do that first.
Yeah.
Because
question on the screen, Dan. Does Dan think the military have been doing abductions?
What I've studied, learned, and heard about Ronald Booth is that the following. In the early 1950s, President Eisenhower met on a craft, I believe it was Alamogordo Air Force Base in New Mexico. I'm pretty sure that's where it was, because I've met some people who said, yeah, my grandfather was there. He saw this. Think about this. President Eisenhower walked onto a UFO, and this is the theory, made a deal with the extraterrestrials. Here's the deal. The deal was the following, mutually beneficial. For America, the deal was the aliens will help us with our technology, and they won't kill us and eat us and wipe us out. On the converse side, for the aliens, and talk to Linda Moulton Howe. You know Linda Moulton Howe?
Yeah.
I heard her talk about this recently. 3 things. Our military looks the other way when the aliens do human abductions. That's the aliens, not the military. Our military looks the other way when the aliens do cattle mutilations. And our military looks the other way when they take women, impregnate them, and then take the fetus months later. In fact, I know 2 women who told me, I know 2 women in real life who told me that's happened to them. They were taken, impregnated, became pregnant, went on board a ship, the baby came out, and then years later they were taken again, and they were shown that both times these were daughters, that they were shown daughters that they'd given birth to, that they didn't even know. So hybridization, alien abductions, cattle mutilations. Those are the extraterrestrials. That's the deal from the 50s. Apparently, that's the deal that we have with them.
My views on that, and strictly, purely my views, is that why would they need to make a deal when we've already touched on earlier, Dan, that we're pretty much powerless to do anything to stop these other intelligences interacting with us? It's just my thoughts on it. Why would they need to make a deal?
That's a great question. You're right. It's a great question. Perhaps the aliens, look, they're highly advanced, civilized. I'm thinking if
always speculate, Dan, innit? And that's I'm throwing this at you, and it's maybe not fair because I haven't got an answer myself.
If they're highly intelligent, evolved, and advanced, they know they could wipe us out. They could probably wipe us all out in 3 or 4 days. Every living creature on Earth, they could wipe us all out. Perhaps, Paul, it was like a protocol kindness, right? It was okay, we could blow them all away, but we should probably make a deal with the U.S. president just because we're smart and we're kind. It would be like, my daughter has a little puppy. She's very kind. She loves this little puppy. She pets a little puppy. The aliens and Eisenhower's like a little puppy for them, probably.
Yeah.
But they were doing a kindness. They were probably following their own protocol to say, look, we're here. We're going to do a lot of stuff. You can't stop us. We prefer you not shoot atomic weapons at it. Don't do that because that's
cooperate. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll really, you start sending nukes at our ships, Dwight Eisenhower. That's really going to piss us off. Don't do that. Don't do that. Let's play in the same sandbox. That's my theory.
I'm just conscious.
And good enough. Go on, Les.
I'm just conscious of the time, and I've got another question here. Let's have a look at that one. Andrew Sheehan is asking, what does Dan believe the intentions of this phenomena are, and do humans need to fear them? I know you've touched on some of the answers previous 15 minutes, Dan, but there's the question.
Look, I think our military leaders or whoever is Majestic 12 and Men in Black today, they know, Andrew Sheehan, they know. The public at large, Paul's a brilliant guy. Les, brilliant guy. I've been studying this 20 years. We don't know. We don't know. It's not common knowledge. The public doesn't know. The government and military all over the world that do know are not sharing this information with us. Do humans need to fear them? Boy, Paul and I just discussed that. I hope not. I hope not. I want to live to see disclosure. I want to see our leaders all over the world. And by the way, the Pope, and apparently the Pope and the Catholic Church, they know way more. They know more than anybody, apparently. They have archives about this stuff, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm hoping when disclosure comes and they tell us the truth, they'll say, look, they could say, look, there are 50 different races. We've identified these races. There's the reptilians, there's the Greys, there's the tall white Nordics. I think this is a group that looks like insects. We have to wait to be seen. I'm praying that they're benevolent. That's why I wrote my book.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think, you touched on the Catholics. Probably there's a lot more secrets held in within the Catholic Church and in Rome, and it's all the secrets are there.
A few years ago, the Vatican announced something like, I'm not an expert, but the Vatican announced something like, world, if aliens are here and they're visiting us, they're God's creatures too. Why would the Vatican have said that statement? You could probably look that up. I think maybe 10, 15 years ago. If they exist, they're also God's creatures. Well, that's wonderful. And of course, aliens didn't create themselves. There has to be God. Eric von Daniken always says, of course there's God, because God had to originate everything else. It had to start with God. But I thought the Vatican saying that statement, well, they know. The famous Ronald Reagan talk at the UN, you guys, you know this.
Yeah,
Reagan in the 80s said, I often wonder if an
alien race or another
race were to visit Earth, how we'd all have to band together.
Unified. Yeah.
Reagan said that. President at the UN. He wasn't making that up. Reagan had 2 UFO sightings in his own life as governor of California. So there have been little crumbs and little tidbits and little clues.
Yeah.
So we assume that disclosure is going to happen. Do you think then that it will unify? Well, we've already sort of played with the idea that it's going to upset some major religions of the world, but on the whole, do you think it's going to unify mankind?
Well, again, it depends. It depends what race or races are revealed to us. If we're told their real intentions, if the aliens go on TV and say, "Hi, I'm Billy from Mars. We're here. Here's who we are. What we're going to do." I think a lot of people will be thrilled. I'll cry. I'll be thrilled, right? You guys will be thrilled. My mother even said, I hope I live to see the day of disclosure. My mother's 88. She said that the other day. She'd be very excited. A third of the world, they're probably like Orson Welles. They're going to run in the streets. Oh my God, they're going to eat us all. They're going to kill us and eat us. Heads will be exploding. Heart attacks. I think a third will be neutral. A third will be panicked in the streets, and a third will be crying tears. It'll be like a new Woodstock era on the earth.
Fabulous, thank you. Les, have we any more questions?
I've not got any more in me.
Okay. Right. Well, I'm curious because poltergeist always something that really interests me. And you talked about a poltergeist experience, Dan, and we've literally got probably 5 or 6 minutes left.
Okay. Sure. The year 2003, I moved into an apartment in Beverly Hills with a new girlfriend. We lived together for a short time till I was allergic to her cat and we had to break up. Anyway, the day we moved into this apartment, I was out at the truck, out on the street. My girlfriend was inside this empty apartment, brand new empty apartment, Beverly Hills. And she's in there by herself. And she heard someone behind her say, "Joe, is that you?" Loud. Joe, is that you? Loud. She turned around. There was no one in the apartment. Okay, number one. Number two, she and I moved our furniture in together. We're living there a couple of nights. One night we're watching TV. There was a package of dry goods in our dining room. It had been there for days. A bag filled with kitchen utensils. We're watching TV. Suddenly, the bag flipped over and all the contents spilled out. And we looked. It wasn't the cat because the cat was in the living room. So we're like, okay, that's pretty odd. There wasn't an earthquake. That's kind of unusual. Why? Like, okay, no big deal. Okay. A couple nights later, we're asleep. Middle of the night, we hear a very loud crash. Glass shattering in our bathroom. We open the door. It's 3 a.m. A tall drinking glass of water, had been taken and smashed onto the floor. So it was all shards of glass on the floor. I said, "Is that the cat?" She said, "No, the cat's under the bed." Wasn't the cat. This one, Paul, is great. A couple nights later, we had a fireplace in the living room. You know those long decorative fireplace matches?
Yeah.
They're like very long. They look like torches, right? I had just bought a package of 50 of those. So I unscrewed the end, brand new package, unscrewed the end. I grabbed them and I pulled them all 50 out very quickly. They lit. 50 matches lit. I'm holding a torch in my hand in my living room. There's fire like up to my nose. I'm like scared to death, right? I'm going to burn my face off. I'm staring at this torch in my hand. I swear to God, a white bluish mist thing from the den flew through the den, flew through the living room. I looked at it. I saw it. It grabbed the torch out of my hand, Paul, all 50 matches, grabbed it out of my hand, and this thing threw them into the fireplace. I stood there like, what just happened? I couldn't believe it. This thing protected me from burning my face off.
Well, that is when you said you pulled them out, and I'm thinking, oh, hold on a minute, this could be just friction and you've lit the matches. But then you came out with the after story, which is even better.
No, lighting. I lit them. The friction lit them for sure. Yeah. It was very surprising because I was expecting to get 1 or 2. I got all 50 by accident.
It's almost like a guardian angel. Something came to stop you burning yourself. Right. Well, Les has just appeared, so I'm thinking that we're just about ready to wind up here. Then, are we, Les?
Okay, so yes. Let me just end it. So, other things happened. Read my book. Other things happened. So, me, my girlfriend, my son, my daughter, we did a Ouija board, and because he was slamming doors, he was waking up my son in the middle of the night, knocking on the walls. Doors were slamming. It was odd things. So, Ouija board. Okay, is there a ghost in this house? Is there someone in the house? Ouija board, yes. What's your name? Okay, Joseph. Now remember, my girlfriend heard Joe. Is that you?
Yeah.
Joseph, right? Then I wrote Paul. Then I said, where are you from? And it wrote Syria. And then I said, Joseph from Syria. I go, are you my grandfather? Yes. My father's father was Joseph from Syria.
Amazing.
How about that? And then he said other things. I said, why are you here? He wrote, Jordan, my son. I said, why do you want my son? He wrote, to teach. Okay. And then I said, please leave us alone. I love you, Grandpa Joe, but you're scaring us to death. You got to go. And then he put yes. And you guys, that was it. No poltergeist activity ever happened ever again.
Wow.
Dan, thank you for sharing all that information with us. Honestly, 2 hours, and I haven't had to say anything. It's truly, I've just been sort of amazed by some of the things you've shared with us, and thank you very much. I hope our audience have. And I'll hand it over to Les. Dan, thank you.
Honor and a privilege there, Dan. And if we ask you to come on again, would you do so?
Oh, sure. And just please, you guys, I'm trying to sell this.
We're all the links are in there. Our moderators have been putting it on the chat for everyone to buy. So the links are all on there. It's in the description, Dan. On that note, Dan, thank you very much from the Truth Proof team.
Thank you. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Right,
Paul. That was another live stream over. And we've got a few, I think we've got a panel on next week. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah. And we've got Nathaniel Gillis. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Nathaniel. We've got the Revenant, Earl Grey, and obviously yourself, Les. And
Yep.
if I've missed anybody, please forgive me. But
okay,
yeah, it should be an interesting
just a
talk.
few seconds run over. I just got to thank Sky for not Sky, Alison for doing the moderating. Sky's been in tonight. Thank you, Sky, for coming onto the stream. And I got to thank Lee Roscoe for another super chat. Great support, Lee. Thank you very much. On that note, goodbye.
And we're going to get Lee Roscoe on because we want his views.
Oh yeah, an invite there from Paul Lee. If you're still listening, yeah. That'd be great.
And it's not just because of super chat. There's loads of people within this chat group that we've got. This it's almost like a community. They've got absolutely fascinating things to share. Let's hear from you. Join us.
Fascinating support. On that note, it's good night from us then. Bye.
All right. Thank you.